Welcome to the fascinating world of chemistry of life. In this chapter, we will study about the atoms, different types of elements, and how these elements give rise to compounds with the help of different types of bonds. And of course, we will also talk about the types of intermolecular forces present between the molecules. Now, before we delve deeper into this chapter, I would like to address the first question that comes into our mind when we study chemistry in biology. That why are we studying chemistry in biology? Because life at its core is a complex, interconnected web of chemical processes happening all around us and within us. Whether we realize it or not, chemistry plays a crucial role in everything that makes us alive, from the air we breathe to the food we eat, and every thought that we think. It involves chemistry. Chemistry is often called the central science because it bridges the gap between biology and physics. In the context of life, it helps us understand how living organisms function at the molecular level. Let's think about ourselves. We are made up of trillions of cells, and each cell is a miniature factory carrying out countless chemical processes every second. These processes are driven by biomolecules like carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. And these molecules interact in incredibly complex ways to sustain life. Let's think about water. Water makes up 60% of our bodies, and it is very essential for life. Without water, none of the chemical reactions in our cells could take place efficiently. It acts as a solvent, helping to dissolve substances, transport nutrients, and regulate temperature. Also, when we eat, our bodies break down the food into simpler molecules. These molecules then participate in chemical reactions that release energy, which powers everything that we do. From moving and thinking to growing and healing, every activity that we do in our daily life and every chemical process that takes place in our body, it needs energy. So, in this session, we will explore how basic principles of chemistry come together to form the foundations of life. So, starting with matter. Now, what is matter? Everything that is present around us, it occupies space and it has mass, is called matter. And of course, we know that matter is present in three basic states: solid, liquid, and gas. And each one of the components of the matter which is present around us is made up of tiny particles. These tiny particles are known as atoms. So we can define atom is the smallest particle of matter that is indivisible. So without atoms, matter cannot exist. So what is basically an atom? Atom is mostly space, but it has a very dense center that is called nucleus, and it contains particles which are called nucleons. Now, the space which is present around nucleus is not entirely empty. It contains another type of subatomic particles which are known as electrons. Electrons, they carry negative charge, protons carry positive charge, and neutrons carry no charge, so they are neutral. That's why we call them neutron. Now think of atom as a tiny solar system where the nucleus is the sun and electrons are the planets. Just like planets orbit the sun, electrons orbit the nucleus. And everything around us, whether it's a book, it's your laptop, it's the mobile phone that you're using right now, it's the air that we breathe in, everything is made of atoms. So when we wave at something, you're basically saying hi with millions of atoms. Think of element as a pure substance that is made up of only one type of atom, and they're usually represented by a symbol. Take a look at these elements: helium, carbon, sodium, and iron. Now, what do we mean by one type of atom? How do we say that the atom is of different types? We define the atom has a different type by its proton number. So, if we talk about helium, there are two protons in its nucleus. If we talk about carbon, it has six protons. So, if an atom will have two protons in its nucleus, we will call it a helium atom or the element helium. And if the atom will have six protons in its nucleus, we will call it the carbon element. If it will have 11 protons in its nucleus, we will call it a sodium atom. And if it will have 26 protons in its nucleus, we will call it iron atom. So that's how each of these elements, they are defined by a specific type of atom. And in these elements, atoms are not chemically bonded to each other, and each one of these elements, they have a different property. For example, helium, it has very different properties from those of carbons because helium is a gas. You know the gas that we blow into balloons and then they rise up in the air? That is helium gas. On the other hand, carbon, it is a solid. It is present either in the form of diamond or graphite. You know, the material that is present in our pencils, that is graphite. And if we talk about sodium, sodium is a very reactive metal. It is very soft and it can cause explosions if it comes into contact with water. On the other hand, iron is also a metal, but it is very hard metal and it does not react with the moisture which is present in its atmosphere so violently. Of course, it reacts and it forms rust, but it does not react violently like sodium. So, by this, we can understand that each element has different properties than the other element. Now, we arrange elements or we organize elements according to their proton number in the form of periodic table. Now, we can see that there are too many elements present in a periodic table. Yes, there are approximately 118 elements in a periodic table, out of which 92 elements are naturally occurring elements. And the rest of the elements, they are artificial elements that are mostly radioactive elements. Now, how many of these elements are present in living organisms? Or how many of these elements they are related to biological world? Almost every element, of course, because we interact with our environmental components as well. But if we only talk about the elements which make up our bodies, they are 16 in numbers. So 16 elements, they make up the bodies of living organisms, and that's why they are called bio. Bioelements not only make up our structure, but they also perform functions in our body. You can see here that these four elements, they make up most of the percentage in our body. So they are present in the highest percentage in our body. But these elements, they are present in lesser percentages in our body, but they do have very important functions. And absence of any of these nutrients or any of these elements, they cause serious diseases in persons, and sometimes a person cannot survive without these elements. Look at this diagram. It shows that oxygen is present in the greatest percentage in our body, that is 65%. After that, carbon, hydrogen, and nitrogen, they are present in the greatest percentages. So we call these elements as macro elements because they are present in the greater percentages. Now, the elements which are present in lesser percentages, they are called microelements. But there are some elements which are present in even lesser percentages, and they are known as trace elements. Now, no matter what, if there are trace elements, there are microelements or macroelements, they are still very important for our body. A compound. A compound is made of two or more different elements which are chemically combined together, like a water molecule. Water is a compound that is made of a hydrogen element and the oxygen element. But as we can see here that these elements they are present in a fixed ratio. Now what do we mean by a fixed ratio? By it we mean that in water always there would be two hydrogen atoms linked to one oxygen atom. So the ratio would always be 2:1. Let's see if we try to change this ratio. Let's say we make it H2O2. So we make the ratio 2:2 or 2 or 1:1. Okay. Now what's that? Is that water? No, that is not water. That is hydrogen peroxide. And that is a very different compound from that of water. It has entirely different properties, and we cannot consider it water molecule. So water will always be present in the ratio. So hydrogen and oxygen in water would always be present in a ratio of 2:1. And moreover, the properties of water they're entirely different from those of the properties of its parent compounds. For example, water is a liquid. It has no taste. It is odorless. It is colorless. While both hydrogen and oxygen they are gases. And they have entirely different properties. They cannot dissolve substances, but water can dissolve substances, right? So it means that the compound it has entirely different properties from the elements that it is made of, and that's why it is a very unique, it is a very special compound or special substance. Now, the compounds that make the bodies of living organisms they are known as biological molecules or biological compounds, and they are of two types: inorganic and organic. Organic compounds may include protein, carbohydrates, lipids, nucleic acids, and some vitamins as well, while inorganic contain water and ionic substances like sodium, chloride, potassium ions, bicarbonate ions, which are present in the living organisms. What is the difference between organic and inorganic? Basically, organic compounds are those which are made of carbon and hydrogen, while inorganic compounds they don't contain carbon, except for carbon dioxide and carbonate ions or bicarbonate ions. So except for these compounds, all the other compounds of carbon, especially those which contain hydrogen bonded to carbon, they are known as organic compounds, and the other compounds are known as inorganic compounds. The examples of the organic and inorganic compounds are shown in this picture that states that I told you that the nucleic acids, they are organic in nature like DNA and RNA. Sugar, that is present in our bodies as well in plants. Plants produce sugars in the form of glucose, so that is an organic substance. Ethanol, which is an alcohol, that is organic. Methane, that we use in our stoves to cook food, that is also an organic substance. On the other hand, table salt, hydrochloric acid, quartz, which are diamond like structures, and carbon dioxide, I told you that they are inorganic substances. You can see here that our body is made up of 70% of water, as we have seen it before, and 24% of our body is made of organic compounds, while only 6% is made of inorganic compounds. And you can see here that in the organic compounds, this orange part, brown orange part, so organic compounds mostly contains 10% of oxygen. Now, in the previous picture, we have seen that our body is composed of 65% oxygen. That rest of the 55% of oxygen is basically present in water. And the rest of the percentages, they are correct. Now, talking about bond. Bond, or a chemical bond, it is an electrostatic force of attraction between two charges. Now, what are charges? Charge is the property of a substance. So, charges, they can either flow in a substance, and when the charges flow, they produce electricity. Or charges can be static. Static means that they can be at a place, they are not moving, they are not flowing. So, in that case, we call it static electricity or electrostatics. Now, as I said, that bond is an electrostatic force of attraction. It means when a chemical bond is formed, it is basically a static electric force between two charges. Now, charges can be positive and negative. Positive charges or negative charges, if they are present, if they are opposite charges, they always attract each other. And if there are similar charges like these two positive charges or the two negative charges, if they are placed close to each other, they always repel each other. So there is a force of repulsion between like charges, and there is a force of attraction between unlike charges. There are three types of chemical bonds present in different types of compounds called ionic, covalent, and metallic bonds. Different bonds are like different types of friendships. Ionic bond is a give and take friendship. In this is a bond which forms when an atom it gives electron to the other atom. While covalent bond is caring type of friendship. It is formed when two atoms they share each other's electrons. And the metallic bond is the community sharing friendship, where the atoms they are sharing bond with each other in the form of a group. But we will not talk about metallic bond in this chapter. We will only focus on the ionic and covalent bonds because these are the bonds which are present in most of the biological molecules. Now, one more thing about these bonds is that ionic bonds are mostly present between a metal and a non-metal. Covalent bonds are present mostly between two or more nonmetals, while metallic bond is present between metals only. So as I told you, ionic bond is like the give and take friendship. So let's think of this example that this person needs a blanket and this person has an extra blanket and it does not need it. So it gives its blanket to the other person. So that is a kind of give and take friendship, and that is an ionic bond. While when both of these persons are feeling cold and both of them need blanket, so they share the blanket. So sharing is caring friendship is like the covalent bond. First we will describe the ionic bond and then we will move on to the covalent bond. Now, why I am describing this periodic table or a kind of periodic table. As you can see this picture, you can see that elements which are present on the left side of periodic table and especially in the bottom left, they are largest in size, while atoms which are present on the top and right of the periodic table, they are smaller in size. And that leads to their different properties. Now, look at this atom of sodium, which is so large in size that its nucleus can't hold the electron which is present in its outermost orbit. So it tends to lose this electron. On the other hand, if we look at chlorine, which is present on the left side of periodic table, it is smaller in size and its nucleus can attract the electrons, incoming electrons as well. So we can say that elements which are present on the right side of periodic table, which are mostly metals, they tend to lose electrons because of their larger size. On the other hand, atoms present on the left side of the periodic table, they tend to gain electrons because of their smaller size, because of the huge attraction of the nucleus towards the electrons. So this summarizes why metals lose electron and why non-metals which are present on the right side of the periodic table gain electron. Look at the example of sodium and chlorine again. So sodium atom has electronic configuration 2, 8, and 1. See, in its atom there are 2 electrons present in the first shell, 8 in the next shell, and there is 1 electron in the outermost shell. Now, the sodium atom, it has to get 7 electrons to complete its orbit, and that is very difficult for it. So instead of adding 7 electrons, sodium loses the 1 extra electron and attains the configuration 2 and 8. So in this case, sodium has lost this electron. And that's why it has got 1 positive charge, because it has given 1 electron. On the other hand, if you look at chlorine atom, it has a configuration 2, 8, and 7. It means that there are 7 electrons present in its outermost shell. Now, instead of losing the 7 electron to attain stability, it can add only 1 electron in its shell to complete its octet. And that makes it the chlorine ion or chloride ion. And chloride ion has a negative charge because it has gained 1 electron. Now, if the sodium ion and chloride ion they're present in the same space, of course they both are charges, and we studied that charges attract each other. So there will be a force of attraction which will be developed between these two charges, and that force of attraction is basically an ionic bond. So ionic bond is a bond which is developed between two ions, and the ions are formed by the transfer of electrons. So when atom it transfers electron to another atom, and they get positive and negative charges. As a result of that, they get an electrostatic force of attraction between them that is called ionic bond. Ionic bonds are very strong, and the compounds which contain ionic bond they are known as ionic compounds. Ionic compounds have a lattice structure. In this lattice structure, each positive and negative ion they are surrounded by their oppositely charged ions. So look at this lattice structure of sodium chloride. First of all, ions they are evenly distributed in this whole lattice structure. They have equal bond lengths between them, and if this one, this green ball, which represents sodium ion, look at this, it is surrounded by chloride ions on all directions. And similarly, each chloride ion is surrounded by a sodium ion in all directions. In this crystal lattice, there are no molecules because each ion is joined together or is bonded together with the other ion. And that's why it has no molecules. And because it has no molecules, there are no intermolecular forces. And all the bonds which are present between these ions, they are ionic in nature. There are no intermolecular forces like hydrogen bonds or dipole-dipole forces. They're only present in the covalent compounds that we are going to study now. So there are some examples of ionic compounds, including sodium chloride that we take in our diet, baking soda, Epsom salt, bleach, drain cleaner which contains sodium hydroxide. So all of these are examples of ionic compounds. Talking about covalent bonds, they are made when atoms share electrons. So look at this hydrogen atom which contains only 1 electron. This is another hydrogen atom. Now both of them need 1 more electron to complete their shell. So instead of losing or gaining electron, they have decided to share electrons. So their shells they overlap, and now they have shared these electrons. This electron pair which is present between two covalently bonded atoms, this is called shared pair of electrons. Shared pair of electrons, or simply shared electrons, or simply shared pair. The compounds which contain these covalent bonds they are known as covalent compounds. Now, covalent bonds they can be multiple. In this example that we studied, there is a single covalent bond between two hydrogen atoms, and this is a covalent molecule. This is a covalent molecule. Now, as I told you that these bonds can be multiple, meaning some substances they can have double bond and some substances they can have triple bond like nitrogen. So oxygen gas, which is present in our air, it has double bond between two oxygen atoms. And nitrogen, which is also present in our atmosphere, it has triple bond between two nitrogen atoms. Now, how are these double and triple bonds formed? The process is simple, just like we studied in the formation of covalent bond between two hydrogen atoms. Look at these two nitrogen atoms. There are 5 electrons present in their outermost shell, and they need 3 more electrons to complete their orbit, to complete their shell. So each nitrogen atom will share its 3 electrons. So 3 red electrons they are shared by with this nitrogen, and the 3 blue electrons they are shared by this nitrogen atom. And as a result, there are 3 shared pair of electrons between 2 nitrogen atoms, like this. So each one has shared 3 pairs, and we know that when one shared pair is present, we call it a single covalent bond. So when 3 are present, we call it a triple covalent bond. And this one, which is present between 2 oxygen, is called double covalent bond. Examples of covalent compounds include ammonia, which is present in fertilizers, water, of course, water is a covalent compound, hydrogen, and many other compounds. For example, I told you which are present in our atmosphere, like oxygen gas, nitrogen gas, carbon dioxide. They are all covalent compounds. And yes, some organic compounds like carbohydrates, proteins, and lipids, they also contain covalent bonds between them. Electronegativity. Before we study about the types of covalent compounds like polar and non-polar covalent compounds, which is by the way very important for you guys to study because understanding polarity and non-polarity, it allow us to understand the functions and the structure of many biological structures, many biological things. So before studying those polar and non-polar components, we must study electronegativity. Electronegativity is the ability of an atom to attract electrons, and it is different in different atoms, and it depends on the structure of atom, I mean the size of atom. So recall that we study the elements on the left side of periodic table, they have larger sizes as compared to the elements which are present on the right side of periodic table. And due to their larger sizes, they tend to lose electron, while those present on the right side, they tend to gain electrons. It means that the elements which are present on the right side of periodic table, they have less ability to attract electrons, and that's why we call it that they have less electronegativity. On the other hand, elements on the right side of periodic table, they have greater ability to attract electrons, and that's why we call it that they have greater electronegativity. If you look at periodic table, you can see here that fluorine is the most electronegative element of the periodic table with an electronegativity value of 4, while cesium, which is present on the bottom of the first group of periodic table, that is the least electronegative element. And we can also see that along with fluorine, oxygen, and nitrogen too have greater electronegativity values, while the other elements have lesser electronegativity values. That leads us to the formation of polar and non-polar covalent bond. Now, before we get into this concept of polarity and non-polarity, you must understand that whether it's polar or non-polar, it is still covalent. It is like we are sharing pizza with somebody. Pizza has 6 slices, let's say. So when you share 3 slices with other person and keep 3 slices to yourself, so you're sharing the pizza equally. That's make you non-polar. But if you're keeping 5 slices of pizza to yourself and only giving 1 slice to the other person, that is a polar bond. That makes you negative. Why? Because you have kept too many slices of pizza to yourself while the other person has got only 1 slice. So that makes him positive and that makes you negative. And positive and negative poles makes it a polar bond. Let's get into the example of a covalent compound, that is hydrogen fluoride. So in hydrogen fluoride, you can see here the hydrogen has electronegativity of 2.1, while fluorine has electronegativity 4.0. It means that it has greater attraction for electrons. So when they will make a covalent bond with each other, fluorine will have this shared pair of electron towards itself like this. So this is a fluorine atom that has shared the electrons with a hydrogen atom. Now, because fluorine has greater electronegativity, it will cause it to have the electron more toward itself and lesser toward hydrogen. So it will attract the electrons towards itself like this. You can see here the chlorine, which is also very electronegative, has greater share of electrons, and that makes it partial negative. Now, partial negative means that it will get slightly negative charge, not entirely, because An entire negative charge is taken by an atom when it completely takes the electron. In this case, it has not completely taken the electron, but it is sharing the electron. But it has got the greater share of electrons toward itself. That's what makes it polar. So we call this bond as polar because there are two poles present, a positive pole and a negative pole. That leads us to nonpolar compounds. So look at these two examples of hydrogen gas and fluorine gas. Now, in both of these, two similar atoms are bonded together. And when two similar atoms are bonded together, it means that they have same electronegativity and they're attracting the electrons with same force. That's why they are sharing the electrons equally. Both in case of hydrogen gas and fluorine gas. So both fluorine atoms, they both have same electronegativity. So both are sharing their electrons equally, both are attracting their electrons equally. That makes it a non-polar covalent compound because there are no two poles here. There is no positive or negative pole here. That's why we call it a non-polar bond and the compounds are called non-polar compounds. So the summary is that ionic bond is basically a give and take bonding or give and take type of friendship, and it is like donating items to charity, and one atom it completely takes electrons. While polar bond is when the electrons are still shared between the atoms, but one atom has greater hold of the electrons. And in nonpolar bonding, both the atoms are sharing electrons completely equally. So that's why they are not two poles on these atoms. But on in the nonpolar bond, one atom's got partial positive charge and one's got partial negative charge due to the unequal sharing of electrons. While in the ionic bond, one atom completely gets the complete positive charge and complete negative charge because of the complete transfer of electrons. And one more interesting thing that electronegativity difference plays a greater role in this. Look at here. Ionic bond is formed when two atoms have electronegativity difference of 1.8. And polar bond is formed when electronegativity difference is greater than zero point 0.8. And nonpolar bond is formed when the electronegativity difference is less than zero point 0.8. Now, what is this electronegativity difference? Let's look into this example again. Fluorine here has electronegativity 4.0 and hydrogen has electronegativity 2.1. So if we take their differences, it makes it 1.9. Now 1.9 is definitely greater than zero point 0.8. So we can conclude that substances which have electronegativity difference. So this is difference of electronegativity. If it is greater than zero point 0.8, then the compounds would be polar. And if the compounds have or the atoms in the compounds have an electronegativity difference less than 1.8 and greater than zero point 0.8, it will be termed as a polar compound. And if the compound has electronegativity difference less than zero point 0.8, so if the electronegativity difference is less than zero point 0.8, then this compound would be termed as nonpolar compound. And if it has electronegativity greater than 1.8, then it would be termed as an ionic compound. Let's move on to the next topic, that is intermolecular forces. They are the weak forces which hold two molecules together. And of course, I told you earlier that molecules are not present in the ionic compounds. Molecules are only of the covalent compounds. So let's say that this is one molecule of water and this is another molecule of water. The force which is keeping these two molecules together, it is called intermolecular force. And think of intermolecular forces like sticky notes. Okay, and the sticky notes, they stick easily but can be peeled off easily too. And there are different types of intermolecular forces that we can think of different strengths of sticky notes. So one sticky note, it sticks very well, but the other sticky note, it is not too strong and it can be peeled off easily. So there are two different types of or different strengths of two sticky notes. So similarly, intermolecular forces, they have different strengths. And on the basis of strengths, we can divide them into two categories: hydrogen bonds and dipole forces. Now, of course, there are more types of intermolecular forces too. We call them induced dipole forces and London dispersion forces and so and so. But in this book, we will only talk about these two forces, hydrogen bonds and dipole dipole forces. Now, hydrogen bonds, as the name suggests, they are present between a hydrogen atom and a highly electronegative atom. So they are present between a hydrogen atom of one molecule and the highly electronegative atom of another molecule. Now, if we revise the lecture, you can rewind the video and you can see that the most electronegative elements in the periodic table are fluorine, nitrogen, and oxygen. So, whenever hydrogen of one molecule makes a bond with the electronegative atom of the other molecule, in this case oxygen, this bond will term as hydrogen bond. So, whenever hydrogen it makes bond with nitrogen, hydrogen of one molecule makes bond with fluorine or with oxygen, it will be called a hydrogen bond. But the but the one thing that you must understand here is that they are not present in one molecule, but they are the components of two different molecules. So that's why we call it an intermolecular forces are present between two dipoles. What is a dipole? A polar molecule because it has two poles. So this molecule is a dipole, this one is also a dipole because it has got a positive and a negative pole. That makes it a dipole because two poles are present in this molecule. Now, the opposite poles of these molecules they attract each other and this force of attraction between these two dipoles is called dipole-dipole force. This force is weaker than the hydrogen bonds. And we can also compare it with the other forces. So among the covalent bonds, so among these forces which are present between the molecules and inside the molecules. So covalent bonds they are the strongest and after covalent bonds, hydrogen bonds, they are stronger than the dipole-dipole forces. And I told you that there were some other types of intermolecular forces too. And one of them is intestinous dipole induced dipole force. So that is the weakest of force which is present between two molecules. Now understand that these are intermolecular forces, while covalent bonds they are present in between the atoms. So they are present between two atoms in the covalent